Hello, thanks for tuning in. I'm Jim Roger.
I'm Kyle Dayton.
And you're watching The Cutting Edge, Revealing the Truth. You know, Kyle, there have been an awful lot of people around the world that have claimed to have had alien encounters and visitations. Doctors, lawyers, bankers, brokers, firemen, policemen, even Democrats and Republicans.
Yes, yes. Presidential candidates too.
But
yes.
however, every once in a while there is a startling case that comes along in the field of ufology, i.e. Travis Walton, Betty and Barney Hill, Betty Andreas, Stan Romanak, and our guest tonight on the show, Jim Sparks, by the way. And so tonight's show is going to deal with this man known as Jim Sparks and the story of his long sequence of alien encounters. Jim was a successful, correct me if I'm wrong, real estate and land developer whose life was very mainstream until at a certain point things really began to change. We're going to talk about that tonight. A long ongoing series of alien encounters began at a certain point in his life, which he actually became when he actually became a student of the aliens, which I find extremely interesting, the alien visitors. And they gave him a message for humanity. Since then, Jim has authored a riveting new book titled The Keepers, an alien message for the human race. The prologue in this book has been written by Linda Moulton Howe, and the foreword written by the late Dr. John Mack of Harvard University. So we're going to talk to Jim and learn all about what he has learned from his visitors and also just exactly what their message for humanity is. So we're going to do all that and much more in a few moments. So first, let's check in with Kyle Dayton and see what's going on with interesting items in the news related to things we discuss on this show. Kyle, take it away.
Thanks, Jim. Well, today my stories have to do with earth science. And I have a story from nasa.gov, news.yahoo.com, and also english.people.com.cn, the People's Daily Online from China. And it has to do with the Northern Lights. Have you ever wondered how that happens? You know, what's the source of those spectacular color lights in the shows it puts on up
Well,
there?
we've been told it's ionized radiation coming from the sun, I guess.
Well, they've suspected it, scientists have suspected a long time. Now they've confirmed their suspicions. And I have here from measurement data provided by the quintet of satellites launched 8 months ago for NASA's Themis mission. Scientists think they've discovered the energy source of the spectacular color display of the substorm known as Aurora Borealis or Northern Lights in the upper latitudes of the Northern Hemisphere. They found that the energy, quote, comes from a stream of charged particles from the sun flowing like a current through twisted bundles of magnetic fields connecting Earth's upper atmosphere to the sun. The energy is then abruptly released in the form of the shimmering display of lights, end of quote. In March, during a 2-hour burst of northern lights over Alaska and Canada, the satellites measured particle flow and magnetic fields from space. To scientists' surprise, the geomagnetic storm powering the auroras raced 400 miles in a minute across the sky. The storm's power was estimated as equal to the energy released by a magnitude 5.5 earthquake. Researchers previously suspected that the wound-up bundles of magnetic fields exist that provide energy for the auroras, but this was not scientifically confirmed until May, recently, when the satellites became the first to map their structure some 40,000 miles above the Earth's surface. This Themis mission is the mission is to investigate what causes auroras in the Earth's atmosphere to dramatically change from slowly shimmering waves of light to wildly shifting streaks of color. Discovering what causes auroras to change will provide scientists with important details on how the planet's magnetosphere works and the important Sun-Earth connection. And speaking of electricity, I have a story from foxnews.com, and it has to do with a coral restoration project dubbed BioRock is being credited for reviving portions of the declining coral reefs off of Bali Island. Just a few years ago, the reefs were dying out from effects of bleaching by rising temperatures, blasting by dynamite fishing, and poisoning by cyanide used for stunning fish. Now, portions of the reefs are coming back and beginning to thrive, which is good news. The project uses submerged metal structures fed by cables sending low-voltage electricity, which causes limestone, which is the building blocks of reefs, to naturally gather on the metal, thereby allowing previously broken off, dying pieces of coral to be salvaged and restored by reattaching them to the reefs. BioRock is described as the brainchild of scientist Thomas Garreau and the late architect Wolf Hilberts. The two have set up similar structures in some 20 countries. Although the Bali experiment is the most extensive, Garreau and other supporters say the electricity greatly rebounds and revives the weakened coral and boosts its growth. And critics say the project in Bali isn't perfect, as it uses traditionally generated electricity, which contributes to global warming, but its effects are limited to when compared to the greater problem of bleaching worldwide. There's a lack of significant financial backing and also an ongoing problem with cost and maintenance. And we have here Chris Brown, an Australian diving instructor who has lived in Bali for 17 years, has participated in Garreau's projects and won funding from the Australian government to set up a BioRock structure electrified by solar panels fixed on a floating offshore platform. And Brown has used seed money from Canberra to establish the Reef Gardeners of Pemudaran, which trains islanders to dive, maintain the solar paneled coral structure, and clean the reefs of harmful animals. And we all know that coral is a keystone species, and we need it for a lot of fish and everything to survive, and also it's a great tourist
It sounds like
stuff.
electrolysis in reverse.
I think so, and
Reverse
well,
polarity electrolysis.
it does, but in the spots of the coral that are being exposed to this electricity, they're thriving, they're coming back. So what does that tell you there?
Good.
And I have a story from ChinaDaily.com. It says that Longshao Lake, a mysterious lake located in southwest China's Chongqing municipality, swells and shrinks 3 times a day. How do you like that? That's
Sounds
strange.
like it's sitting on top of a lava tube.
Something. It says, with no ditch or other lakes nearby, how does the lake come up with 3 regular 1-hour swells and shrinks at 8 a.m., 12 a.m., and 4 p.m. respectively every day? How do they do that? They don't know. Chongqing Economic Times reported that the lake's mysterious moves finally prompted a latest scientific investigation of the lake organized by Chongqing Exploitation Association and local hydrology and geology experts. The 2-day-long investigation was planned for last month. The report said the team would take a boat to the center of the lake where 3 obvious water holes are pumping up waters every day from the lake's underground. The team was also going to investigate a tree leaf covered deep pit that lies in the Mount Cliff about 20 meters away from the lake's center, as they suspect it might account for the major reason for the strange siphon phenomenon of the lake. And they said dating back to 1982, a severe drought hit the area, but the 3 water holes in the lake still pumped out water for 3 days, and tens of thousands of snakes also came out of the holes. Local Tourism Administration is also planning to make the area of the mysterious lake a tourist site. I would go see it if I were in China. Definitely go.
That sounds like it could be a methane gas hazard.
It's something.
Something coming in and out of the ground like that.
Something.
I don't know if I'd want to sit over the top of that on a boat.
Well, in the next show, they may have an answer by the next show, and if they do, I'll let you know on that. And I have one final story tonight from phys.org.com, that's P-H-Y-S-O-R-G. They report that a recent statement issued by glaciologists at the Norwegian Polar Institute says that analysis of ice cores from one of the highest glaciers on Norway's Arctic islands in the Arctic archipelago of Svalbard confirms that recent local temperatures there were at their highest since the end of the Viking Age around 800 years ago. Thermometer measurements taken since 1911, meanwhile, show that 2006 was the warmest year on record in the archipelago. And according to Elizabeth Isaacson, one of the glaciologists at the Institute, she says the warming is accelerating. She said the Viking Age was much warmer than the following centuries, and at that time, people from Europe's Nordic region had access to ice-free seas all the way to Greenland and North America. She also said the ice core samples didn't go deep enough to determine the exact temperatures at the time, but heads up.
Yeah, I don't doubt that, because they did set up settlements in Greenland and Iceland many centuries ago. Of course, they say Columbus discovered America. You know how that goes. I don't know.
So that's my Earth Science stories for today, Jim.
Good report. Thank you, Kyle.
Thank you.
Well, as I mentioned earlier, Jim Sparks experienced radical life changes when a series of encounters in his life began, when he actually became a student of the visitors. But before we get into this, the first thing I want to do is welcome Jim Sparks to the show, to the Cutting Edge. Thank you so much for coming, Jim.
It's great to be here.
Oh, it's our privilege. Jim, let's start off by telling us a little bit about your life and how you became involved with this stuff.
Sure. It all started in mid-1988. And prior to 1988, as far as I was concerned, abductions happening all over the globe in the hundreds of thousands, maybe even the millions, or anything like that, as far as I was concerned, wasn't even possible. I wasn't even into the subject at all. As a matter of fact, you know, I did believe that, scientifically speaking, that there are billions and billions and trillions of suns or stars, and that perhaps there could be intelligent life, and maybe UFOs, from obvious photos and stories, were appearing or visiting, or maybe some science expeditions. But the abduction scenario on a global basis in the millions, no. As far as I was concerned, that wasn't possible. So I like to consider myself, and most people do, to be a logical, honest, down-to-earth person. And in mid-'88, my whole life completely turned around when it indeed happened to me.
Wow, okay, mid-'88. So when the encounters began, I guess there was nowhere to hide, right?
No.
So how did you handle that psychologically?
It was terrible. I break it down. It's been going on for almost 20 years now. The first 6 to 7 years were traumatic. They were horror-filled. There was no rhyme or reason. I didn't understand what was happening. And one might say that I was either gifted, or one might say that I was cursed with something that really stands out. And it's the simple fact that my memory or recall is somewhere in the neighborhood of 95 to 98%. Just as though the conversation that's taking place here amongst the three of us, myself talking about it or anybody else talking about it 30 minutes later and saying, well, what took place? Without the benefit of hypnotic regression. So it was total recall. It started dreamlike in '88, and I thought I was having the same reoccurring dream. I didn't pay it much credence, except it was just happening over and over again. So they sort of started in a gentle way, meaning that I dreamt that something was coming into the bedroom, escorting me out through the hallway. I was walking through the guest room window out into the woods. Something took place, and they brought me back the same way and back into the bed. And that was happening 2-3 times a week. But what startled me, and when I realized that this wasn't a dream, like I said, they kind of broke me in gentle, was I became conscious during one of those episodes, and I saw what was going on around me. When it came to the window part, we literally walked through the window. Now, I attribute all of these things to high technology. Matter as we understand it, or the laws of physics as we understand it, can be manipulated to where they just don't apply. They create magnetic fields, I'm guessing magnetic or certain kind of fields, and they render matter in a way that can be used any way they'd like, one of which is walking through walls, or them coming in through the same way. But what startled me was our lawn was, our front lawn at the time had thousands of these little honeysuckle flowers, and in the morning there would be dew on the grass. During one of those so-called reoccurring dream episodes, I had walked across the lawn and back into the guest room, as I mentioned. The next morning when I went into the guest room, I could see my footprints in the lawn, but I could also see the heel of a foot embedded in the grass, and I could see the toes of a foot embedded in my carpet between the window. And so you could, and also not only could I see that, but the honeysuckle flowers and the grass and so forth were right there in the bedroom. So I knew at that point that something extremely unusual was going on.
It wasn't imagined. It was truly something physically happening.
That's how it came in first. Now, for most people, these things are traumatic. We're talking about beings. My experiences have been primarily with what are commonly referred to as greys. They're 100% telepathic. They can think 10 to 100 times faster. All their technology is thought activated, so they don't speak. Everything's thought activated. They can go from point A to point B anywhere in the cosmos with little to no time passing. They can create a field that renders invisibility. They radiate an energy that's miserably uncomfortable. So most abductees will say, or as you know in this field, that most abductees have fragmented or very little memories, because primarily the physical memories are taken away, because just to be around these things is a pretty scary thing.
Sure. Jim, are you the first one that you know of in your family? Has there been anybody in your family before you that has had similar experience?
Well, the truth came out later when I started telling my family and friends what was going on. At first, they weren't very acceptant of it at all.
Sure.
Acceptant of it at all, and that was even difficult in those early years. However, as time went on, and more reports came out, doctors were backing it up, professors were backing it up, and all these UFO stories were coming out. My mother became a little more comfortable with it, and to my surprise, yeah, my mother passed away here a few years ago, but she had a few experiences. So yeah, they do follow family lines. They track family lines, no doubt about it.
I know my grandmother has. I've had missing time, and I know my grandmother used to tell me about the spaceships outside of her window before she died.
She did.
Yeah.
Wow. It says a lot.
Oh yeah.
So, especially back in, during that time period.
yeah.
Sure.
Tell me, in your book, I read. I'll let you explain to the audience about the owl that
Sure.
appeared to you and what it symbolizes and so forth.
During the course of these experiences, things would take place. Well, I found myself abducted, pulled. I don't have the perfect word for it. But during these several hundreds of them, in fact, I've lost count, things would take place naturally on board, and then at times things would take place in my home. And when you talk about the owl, they do something called screen imaging. Again, it's technology. They focus or project in the mind, or the human mind, that you're looking at something other than what you're looking at. In some cases, it was an owl. And the owl would be something that you're more comfortable with or you're not afraid of. That would be during an abduction scenario. And so they would appear that way from time to time.
In the interview that you did with Linda Moulton Howe for Nexus magazine, I remember reading in there that when you met up with the reptilian beings, there was like a hologram of something on its face, and the voice was not in sync with the mouth of these, so you knew it was just
to keep you from being scared.
Yes.
That was
kind of funny. That was kind of funny the way you described it, I thought.
It was many years of just face-to-face encounters with, again, what are commonly referred to as greys, and the first encounter with what is commonly referred to as reptilians, because they had scales, was the fact that they did screen image or a hologram over their face of a person's face, and it was not in sync, so the mouth was moving, but the telepathic message was not in sync with the lip movement.
But you could see basically what they were behind so you knew, but it gave you comfort anyway, seeing the human face superimposed over the real face?
That's right, that's right.
My wife and I, one night I was in bed, we had a sliding glass door, and there was about a 3.5 foot tall owl staring right in the glass window at me. But I'm not afraid of these things. I'm not afraid of UFOs, period.
Right.
And I sat up in bed, I looked it square in the eyes. I said, okay, what's next?
Sure.
And the thing just turned and went away.
Did you think of it as an owl at the time, or did you think it was another being?
No, I knew it was bizarre and I knew it was strange. But we're tested. We have to overcome our fear before we can move on and advance.
Absolutely.
And I knew that, and that's why. But anyways, screen memories, just a quickie. A friend of mine in Germany, when I was in the Army, he was driving from Amberg, A-M-B-E-R-G, to Grafenwehr, which about a 45-mile drive at night. And he saw this glowing, egg-shaped craft 2 or 3 feet above the ground, just sitting there. So he was driving a Volkswagen Common Gear. He pulled over to the side of the road, and he was just amazed. He just stood there and watched it. And one thing he remembers, this is where the screen memory comes in. He said the strangest thing happened. He says a dog came from the craft, the glowing thing, and walked up to my car, got up on the window, put both paws on the window, looked in at me, then he went down and he walked back to the craft.
Right.
If that isn't a screen memory, I don't.
Sure, that's what it is, exactly.
I don't know what it is.
It projects itself as something that it's not, in your mind, to keep you from being afraid.
But getting back to you, Jim, you had the opportunity, and you were, I guess, reluctant at first to learn from these beings, and they were. So how did this all begin, and
sure,
what did you learn, and how did you learn it?
Didn't want to have anything to do with them. I was saying it was dreamlike at first, and then they got very extremely abrupt and radically changed as it got into latter 88. I say there's two ways to get abducted, the easy way and the hard way. The easy way is when crafts are on the ground and the little beings escort you.
Yeah.
The hard way is when a craft is in flight and they use the technology to pull you from point A to point B, and that's not a fun thing. You get a sensation in your stomach, you hear a loud whipping whirling sound inside your head. It gets louder and louder, and when the sensation gets up to your chest, your heart starts racing. You think you're going to die, you black out. Then, you black out, you're paralyzed blackout. You get a sense of acceleration, like you're, instead of going up, you feel like you're being pulled down like a roller coaster, only 100 times faster. And then when you regain consciousness after, you black out after the roller or the acceleration, and then you find yourself at point B. But however, those first 6 years, where I found myself in the same place. I was in a room, I was sitting on a bench, there was a table in front of me that was, I called it a screen table. It was artificial intelligence. It actually was a teaching machine, which I didn't want anything to do with. In front of that table was a wall, and it had a screen on it. And those first 6 years, I was primarily paralyzed. The method of instruction at that time, those first 6, 7 years, were punishment and reward. And all these things are going to sound scary, and all these things are going to sound awful, and all those things were those first 6, 7 years. They were ambiguous. They didn't like answering questions. If they did, they answered in riddles. I was forced in those early years to convert block lettering, regular English American block lettering, into a symbolic form, which I thought was the stupidest thing, but it ended up being something just so phenomenally fantastic, meaning that we converted every letter from A to no Q's and Z's, in that alphabet, to the symbolic form. And that took a few years, and punishment and reward in that was not very nice. So what I learned early in those years was, if I wanted to get home, cooperate and get back. But I still didn't know what a plan, I didn't know what an agenda was, and I didn't know why I was learning this stuff. Until one particular session, they put a script, normal block lettering script, on that screen, excuse me, and it was approximately 40 to 50 pages about a friend of mine named Jerry, where I could read it normally. And I read it one page at a time, and it went methodically from him as a child, where he went to school, what his parents were like, what was the community like, and it was page after page after page. And when it got to the present at that time, it went on into the future. It did not speak of his death or where he died. So it mesmerized me, but I ended up reading the 40 to 50 pages. Soon after that, they presented that symbolic form, excuse me, and it was less than a half a page in the symbol form, and to my astoundment, I was just astounded. I was mesmerized by the fact that I could read that whole story in just that half page, quickly. Then they further went with something that was the size of a 50-cent piece, and it had like a shorthand version of that, about that size, and it had a shorthand version of that symbolic form, and they flashed it before my eyes, and in an instant I got the whole story. So the mind is capable of doing that. It can bypass the verbal, it bypasses the sound, working on the eardrum and so forth, and for us to put all that data together, process that data for knowledge. Now, to give you an example, and I like to describe it this way, this is when I started getting a little more cooperative, because now I'm seeing something here, and you should have seen what I was like before that. If I could have squeezed their fat heads off their skinny little necks, I would have done it. If I could have tore up the ship, I would have tore up the ship. They did semen extraction, they did emotional experiments, they did a lot of horrific things with no explanation. They do not have social skills, but as I later learned, there was a purpose for all of this. But going back to the symbolic form thing, if I were to say, just name any movie that you've seen lately. Just name any movie.
August Rush.
Okay,
Saw it last
August
week.
Rush. And you saw it, right?
Yes.
Okay. Now, if I say August Rush to you, That entire movie within a 1 second period flashed through your entire mind, didn't it? The
Yes.
emotions, what went on, what took place. Okay, so they could take that symbol, just like I said, put that entire movie on that symbol, flash it before your eyes. I don't know if I'm blocking the camera.
No, you're
here.
okay.
No, you're not.
Put it down, you would have that whole thing.
Why do you think that they didn't give you all this stuff like telepathically right away and you had to learn it? Do you know, was there a process?
Because
Why was the process?
it was a training, and I don't like to see. I don't claim to embrace alien culture. I'm seeing an agenda for the globe. I'm seeing an agenda for the environment. I'm seeing an agenda for the human species for the first time in its history to possibly evolve. And according to them, we've been here before with over 6 billion people, with the minds that we have, and the technology that we have, and we have self-destructed, according to them. And I have a healthy suspicion of what they say, but after 20 years, I'm finding stuff to be factual. But to answer your question directly, when you're around something that is so odd, it looks odd, it smells odd, it radiates an energy that's terrible. For example, it's just not something you can adjust to right away. And even if the experience is pleasant, let's say you were on board and you had an experience that was pleasant for an hour, they'll still take the physical memory away from you, because whatever was imparted in your mind or in your being as something beneficial, the experience will get in the way of you doing anything.
Oh, I see.
Unfortunately, for most people, the experiences are scary. And it took several years for me to be 100% conscious to adjust to all of this stuff. But there was an event that took place right around the, so if you can imagine, okay, I should, before I go to the positive stuff, I want to make it clear that there was a lot of mess that went on, and I can see why a lot of abductees are bothered by a lot of these things. But there was the semen extraction, there was the emotional experiments, there was the learning was based on punishment and reward. Some of it was painful. It was extremely disruptive. I had 2 businesses going. It's a good thing I had the money in those years from my hard work to buffer what was going on, because I did try to escape them. I would go from state to state. It wouldn't do any good. I abandoned my home. I was in Texas at that time. I moved to Florida and didn't do any good. Till finally one day I woke up and said, you know something, Jim? These things come a godzillion miles to get here. And I'm doing something stupid like going to another state thinking I'm going to get away. No, that's just not going to happen.
Do you think they implanted you with anything?
People ask me that a lot, and I don't want to know.
Okay.
And no, it's okay. I'm not like shy about it. Here's how I see it. A lot of extremely positive things have happened to this person, and it's enhanced so much of my life, and I know so much more. And it's one of the reasons, it's the main reason why, I'm here in part of this, is sharing the story, because I can fill in some gaps. And I've been credited with doing that with some pretty credible, individuals, leading researchers, professors, and so forth. But there was an event that took place. So if you can understand, those first 6, 7 years, all I wanted to do was kill him. I was paralyzed almost all the time, and so. But there was an event that took place into the 6th year that changed my whole thinking with him. Other than the fact I enjoyed what this converting these block letters into this alien symbolic forms. I saw that's a good way to transmit data and understand it real fast. But there was one experience that changed everything. It was the main thing. And when I had gotten pulled, instead of finding myself on board, I found myself standing up out in the clearing in the woods. The clearing in the woods was about the size of a football field. Below my feet, and the first thing I noticed was the fact that I could move 100%. I wasn't paralyzed. Below my feet were about 12 to 15 people scattered on the ground. They were either nude or in their night clothes, so you could tell that they were pulled while they were sleeping or abducted. Yeah. And there were 3 piles of people, 12 to 15, and 3 piles on the ground. I was able to move. That was the first time I had full motion. There was a gray standing next to me in my pile of people, and there was a gray in each group of people that were sprawled on the ground, still not knowing what was going on. 3 lights came from the horizon, hovered over 3 groups of people. descended from the clouds, and for the first time in 6 years, I actually saw a craft from the outside. What I saw was, what I did not know what was going on, but I later knew as it went on, was this was the beginning of a mass abduction, which they have been doing thousands and thousands of these things on a daily and nightly basis all over the globe. And it was a beginning part of that.
About when was this? What
This would
time
have
frame?
been approximately 80, add 6, 7 years to 88, so it would have been like 94, 95.
And where were you, Jim?
And at that time I had abandoned my home in Texas, so I was in Florida.
Okay.
I had moved, I left my home in Florida thinking I can get away from
On the
it.
run.
Yeah, rented it for 10 years and finally sold it. But yeah, on the run. And one of the first telepathic words to me were, the people were mostly paralyzed that were on the ground, was to calm them. And then it dawned on me, I said, my God, what are these guys giving me a job? And that's exactly what I did, is I calmed them on the ground. 3 crafts came over, these 3 different groups. They descended from the clouds. I saw for the first time what they looked like from the outside. I was astounded by it. I was mesmerized by it. In fact, I stood out from the group and I put my hands up in the air and I'm just going, they're beautiful, they're beautiful. Wow. Boom, I blacked out. And this is the event that changed things. When I regained consciousness, and then I saw some pretty amazing stuff. I found myself in a corridor, a large corridor, in the craft now, and there were, with the people that were on the ground just standing, they were in like zombie-like state. So if I walked forward, they all walked forward. The next telepathic instructions were lead them. Now, I knew there wasn't any danger. Now remember, it took 6 years of all this unadulterated boo-boo to get to this point, and so I wasn't gonna. I was going along with it because I want to know what's happening here. I led them into a humongous opening that was about the size of a basketball gymnasium. That's the best way I can describe it. And just what I saw was rows and rows and rows and rows and rows of monitors. At the end of these rows of monitors, I could see grays interacting with people. They were military personnel. I could see officer, I could see regular paramilitary personnel. There were civilians wearing lab coats. There were people that were not in military wear, and they were just shoulder to shoulder, and a lot of activity going on at the back of this craft. The next telepathic words to me were seat them. So I took the first person that was with me and I walked that person and sat that person into this cubicle looking thing that had this monitor on it, still not knowing what was going to go on. I came back for the second one, and I was mesmerized by what I was seeing. I started looking around. The telepathic voice said no, very loud in my head twice. I ignored it. I was too curious, and boom, I blacked out.
Wow.
Now, when I regained consciousness, I found myself sitting in front of my monitor. And I would say in that room, it held easily almost 1,000 people. All the monitors lit up at the same time. And the first scene, and I should add, this is going to sound kind of spooky, but it was part of it. I should add that in all of us, there was a tube either in the back of our forearm, and there was another, or a tube in people's calves. Now, what I learned as it went on, it was to heighten your emotions, it was to heighten your sensitivity to color and stimuli. Because the first thing that came up on the monitor, which took everybody's breath away, was an earth scene. It was the ocean. It was pristine. It was turquoise blue. It was drop dead gorgeous, and it was teeming with fish. You could see the sky. The sky was crystal clear. There was no pollution, and all you can do was go, "Oh my God, it's beautiful. It's beautiful." So your senses are heightened. The scene is drop dead gorgeous, and so you could hear almost 1,000 people in that whole gymnasium-sized room aboard that craft just, "Wow, it's beautiful." Not knowing what was going to happen, the scene fades away with a hum, and then 3 seconds later, again like a The next scene was like a lake scene. and you could see this beautiful lake. You could see the mountains in the background. You could see beautiful trees, and you knew you were looking at scenes before the planet was messed up by the environmental issues we have with pollution and so forth. And it was one Earth scene after the other, and they were just absolutely drop dead gorgeous. Then the scenes slowly started turning ugly. The beautiful scene where there was the beautiful clear ocean with teeming with fish. The water was dingy brown. The fish were bloated and dead, floating on top of the water. The next scene was where there was the beautiful lake with the mountains. The mountains that were melting on the top, and the air was polluted, and you could see acid rain and stuff that had been killing the trees. And so now you had the reverse sensation, which is, oh God, no, this is ugly, I can't take it. And then another phenomenal thing that took place was, all at the same time, telepathically, the voice came into our heads that said, as each scene was coming on, you're killing your planet. Your planet is dying. You're killing your planet. Your planet is dying. And then I blacked out. When I came to, on a funny note, I found myself in a room that reminded me of a locker room. I was again with the people that were first on the ground. Now there was about 35 to 50 people on the ground, but overall they had collected nearly 1,000 for that whole thing. And they were moaning and groaning and crying and disoriented because of, anyway, they take the physical memory away, but then the experience is still there with the environment. You're enhanced with something. And they were complaining about either the sore that they had on their arm or on their calf. And the telepathic message to me was calm them again. And I went along going, hey, you look, these things heal fast. I've been going through this for years. You'll be okay. But on a funny note, there was a telepathic sort of a PA in all our heads that went, nobody gets to leave until you find your exact clothes. And so all these people went from moaning and groaning and crying. You think they'd have it all nice and stacked up? No, stuff was in piles. To diving into this stuff to try and find the little clothes that they did because they were the night clothes. So anyway, that experience turned me from resistor to cooperator, and that was, and then it's evolved quite a bit since then.
From resistor to assister.
Yeah, that would
yes,
be
you could say.
Yeah, sister would be better.
Thank you for sharing that with us, Jim. Could you talk a little about, suppose somebody were abducted for, in Earth time, maybe 30 seconds, but when they're out there, could that be expanded to maybe even half a lifetime, then recompressed back to the other half of that minute?
Time is definitely manipulated by them, and it definitely, one must, and I've always kept, what kept my sanity, and particularly in those early years, was the fact that I knew that what was going on here was science. What was going on here was technology, and they can manipulate time. I had one experience in particular, and it denotes time travel in a sense, that I thought was an accident or a mistake. I was laying on my sofa, and I was watching television like anybody else would in their living room. I had my hand, I had my hand out like this watching TV, and I had gotten pulled from that position. The abduction experience took about 2 hours. Now, what I should say happened before I got pulled was when I was watching television, I had gotten up. There's a reason for me going into this detail. I walked across the living room. I walked around the island. Our kitchen had a little island. I walked around that island. I looked into the aquarium. I opened the refrigerator door, got a few snacks, shut the door, came back and lay back on the sofa, and then I had gotten abducted. When the abduction experience took 2 hours, Jim, and then when I had gotten back, and this only happened once, they brought me back 2 to 3 minutes before they took me. But here's what made it really peculiar. So now I'm back on the sofa in this position again, being pulled back. I see myself standing in the living room going through the whole motions, walking through the living room, going around the kitchen. Now I'm laying there on the sofa and I'm going, pop, 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 pop. My heart is pounding. I'm going, oh my God, that's me.
That's bizarre.
That's me.
Like a
Now,
time warp or something.
But I'm paying attention.
Yeah.
I hear the sounds of my footsteps.
Yeah.
I see myself looking in the aquarium. I see myself go into the kitchen, and when I opened the refrigerator door, the light came on. So now I'm seeing physical light. Now here I am 2 to 3 minutes earlier. I'm solid. I'm here. I'm on the sofa. I'm watching myself. I'm keeping my mouth shut. And then I saw myself tinker in the refrigerator, grab a snack, shut the door. Now here's where I started getting really scared. I watched myself walk through the kitchen, and I realized, I said, oh my God, what happens when me sees me? What will me do when me sees me,
It's like
right?
back to the Future. It's that like that
Right.
movie there.
Well, as I approached myself, I noticed that that other person did not have any conscious awareness of me being there. It did not see me. And as that person came closer to me, my next fear was, is he going to lay on me because he was heading back towards the couch? Was he going to flop himself on top of me? But as that person got within a few feet, he became transparent, and as it got closer, just completely faded away and disappeared.
Wow.
So there's something about the manipulation of time or going back where the physical phenomena of it just doesn't quite jive, but it's separate, but yet it's still in the
It's
same
like
place.
You don't think
a
of-
phase shifter
Yes, or
with yourself.
A hologram of yourself or
Exactly,
something, maybe.
exactly. But then the weird part was a hologram is the best way to put it. The light was still there and the sounds were still there, but yet the recognition of the other self wasn't. So I don't know. Maybe that dilemma of if you go back and you shoot your father or your grandfather, will I
you
be
be
here? It may
born?
not apply. The bullet may just go through.
Good question.
Energies.
Interesting.
Yeah, good question, like the chicken or the egg.
Really.
What about on board the ships? Somebody has to be in charge. Have you ever came in contact with the one or ones, or plural, the people in charge or the beings in
Sure,
charge?
I like the way you put that. There is a regiment and there is an order, and there is a supervisory order, and they radiate an energy that is not of this world. And in the beginning, when you're around these beings, it's miserably uncomfortable. As time goes on, human beings adjust, we adapt, it's just our nature. You start to adapt to this energy and it's not so bad. But what you find is that the higher the supervisory role, or when it gets to maybe a boss, so to speak, the stronger that energy is that radiates.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, and you can tell. So I classify two different types of beings with the grays. There's the worker beings, and there's what I call the true aliens. The worker beings are approximately 3 feet tall. They're half biological. In my experience, they're half biological, half robotic, kind of scary. They're the ones that have the giant teardrop eyes. Those are the ones with the big heads that we hear about and the pointed chins. And I would say that better than 99% chance in almost 20 years of experience, there's no real consciousness of their awareness. They're programmed beings. Those are a lot of the ones that are just made to perform tasks.
More like a biological robot.
Yeah. And then you have what I call the true aliens, or the flesh and blood, so to speak, flesh and whatever's inside them, blood. I hope, I suppose, I don't know. They're about a foot taller. They're around 4 foot, 4.5 feet, maybe sometimes taller. Their heads aren't as large as theirs, but they're bigger than ours. Their eyes aren't as large as those worker beings, but they're bigger than ours. And the 3 foot guys, they have features that are all the same, whereas those grays have features that stand out a little bit. Like their flesh or skin is like leather-like, and you can see wrinkles and lines. So you can distinguish one from the other by looking, but it takes a little time because they all look the same at first, but after a while you'll start to notice, after many years of it, differences.
Any idea on the ones that are in control, the ones that aren't droids or drones, whatever? Any idea on their lifespan, how long they live, or where they're from?
This is a big part of what we're about now. I'm about now, as a matter of fact, because of these profound experiences with that denoted the change as far as the Earth's environment and abducting people all over the world, all over the globe for this awareness. I believe it's going to reach critical mass. There were ladder abductions.
And that's what this show is about, by the way.
Like the 100th monkey theory.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you
I'm sorry to
what.
interrupt you.
No,
Go ahead.
that's okay. You're not. I mean, where it's really astounding and amazing is it's gone on to the fact that the human species, when it comes to, I'm going to get to this life thing. This is what this is leading to. The human species is at the point where we can possibly evolve for the first time in our history, in our known history. The galactic neighborhood, so to speak, dictates that we clean up our own backyard first before we can join the galactic neighborhood.
Sure.
There's things that we can do within ourselves for us to evolve. What I am seeing about these beings is I believe that they have the technology that they just don't die.
Wow.
I don't think they die. Now, can they die? Yes. Can they be killed? Yes. Can they biologically go on with the science and the technology they have? Yes. And here's something that makes it even interesting to me, even more interesting, is the fact that, people, generally, you may live, the average lifespan is what? If we're lucky, we may live to be, 75 or 80 years old? About the time we figure things out, we pass away. We've got all this data, we've got all this information, and unfortunately we pass
Goes to
away.
waste in a short lifetime.
Yes, it does.
Yep.
And at best, we may be able to pass 20 to 30% of it on to the next generation.
If they listen.
If they listen,
Yeah.
right.
And then the cycle goes on and on and on and on and on. Okay, so the one of the biggest problems with the human species evolving is the fact that, even if we lived another 500 years in good health, with good mental capacity, let's say the both of you lived for 500 more years, okay, and then we brought you back 500 years from now to the present. Do you not think you would not have a lot to offer to the world?
Interesting.
today?
Absolutely.
And biblically, what did they know in biblical times to be able to live hundreds of years and Methuselah
That's right,
living?
that's right.
You know, what got lost in the interim?
Imagine how many
You know, if that
different
is true, what happened?
PhDs you could acquire in 500
Yes.
years.
Exactly,
Right.
exactly. Now imagine this. Imagine having a race. Now the Greys are similar to us in a lot of ways and very different in a lot of ways. But in similarity, imagine having several million human beings, or billion is what we're going for, human beings who not only go 500 years, but go 1,000 years, or go 2,000 years, or go further. What you would retain and what you would learn and what we would know. And it's a big part of a drive that I'm doing now. I've got, I'm putting together an organization, or we are, called Your Earth.
Your Earth?
Your Earth.
Okay.
Its intentions are to buy up a tremendous amount of rainforest land, and equatorial rainforest land. It's environmentally oriented. It intends to have more money and more resources that it needs, that are necessary to promote the function of the human species evolving for the first time in its history. We're going to pull in the best minds that the globe has to offer. We're going to pull in all the resources that the globe has to offer. This is on recommendation by the experiences that I've had. I've got a website. Don't want to sound like a commercial here, but if you want to get really updated with
Nice
this,
website, by the way.
thank you. And it's we put together a package just for the listeners of your show this evening.
Thank you.
And it's called gem-sparks.com or gem-sparks.com, whatever you're more comfortable with, and you can find it there. Our whole intentions is this Your Earth thing is in its purity, is intends to buy up as much of rainforest land on this globe as possible, and it's also, as I mentioned earlier, its intentions are to promote the human species evolving. So
The rainforests are literally the lungs,
The lungs,
of the planet.
yes,
Yes.
the
Yes.
purifiers in the lungs of the planet.
how much time do we have here left?
Probably got about, what, 5 or 6 minutes?
Okay,
Okay.
should mention that a basic plan for the rainforest would be to purchase it, also to house it with the Indians that are indigenous to that land. The third part is to the people, the poor who have been thrashing and burning all these years. would be in their part, in their labors to regenerate, help regenerate the rainforest. They would get a plot of land in their efforts to regenerate it with adequate housing and the knowledge of crop rotations for their efforts.
Like teaching the people in Bali how to operate the metal structures that are reviving the coral reefs there.
Exactly, exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
Now these
Good
same,
example.
right, not to interrupt you, but these same
didn't mean to
people,
interrupt you.
I'm
Yes.
with you, no, I apologize, but
No.
I'm with you on this because we'll
Yes.
apologize back and forth
Okay.
whenever, we're all polite.
I'm
Like
sorry.
they're but that's kind of what you want
Yes.
to do with the organization then,
Yes.
isn't it?
Yes.
And you get the local people involved, and then they understand you shouldn't slash and burn. Now they know why, and it would be a benefit for them to stop it and do
yes.
it the better way.
And stop it, and all, but they have to be rewarded for it. So now they get a plot of land and they're educated that's theirs for their efforts in helping restore it.
They'll take care of it better.
And another thing that these guys have come up with, again, I don't claim to embrace alien culture, but a lot of these things that I thought were silly or stupid or above my head, I'm seeing are factual. Another thing they claim where we should go strongly is into an amnesty program, because there are black ops. We all know that.
Oh, yeah.
There's sanctioned and unsanctioned agencies with such high technology that if a lot of this stuff can come forward, it would be so beneficial. Now, the problem is, because for national security purposes, for different reasons in the last 60 years, a lot of these people, they're not bad people, but they're sworn to keep this stuff a secret. And unfortunately, where they're bad is they've maimed, discredited, and in some cases, murdered
Yeah.
innocent law-abiding citizens to keep this stuff secret. This is what I'm saying here isn't a secret. But it looks like, because I'm seeing human beings in conjunction with these ETs, they want to come forward with a lot of these technologies that can really change the Earth's environment. And what's powerful is the reason, and it's almost so silly, but the reason the bulk of them will not come forward with it is because what are you going to do to me when you
Yeah.
find out, the world finds I've committed crimes?
We need an amnesty.
Amnesty.
Yeah, an amnesty to relieve them of their security oaths or whatever. I think I agree.
That's what Your Earth is about. So that's what the foundation will be about, the environmental issues, and it's going to be about the pushing for an amnesty.
Will there be a link from your website to that project?
Yes, absolutely, when they go on. It's, again, I
Okay.
don't repeat myself, it's
right.
jim-sparks.com.
Jim-Sparks.com, and we'll get a graphic up on that on the show later on. Jim, during your book, I know we don't have much time, but they showed you a family lineage or genealogy,
Yes.
didn't they?
Yeah,
It took you back in history?
yeah, it was, well, it was in holographic form so I could see it, because I asked, what do I got, about a minute, 2 minutes maybe?
You got a few minutes, yeah.
Okay.
About 2 minutes.
2 minutes, so I know I don't overrun it and we're not
That's okay.
done. However, they don't like to answer questions, okay? And so I've learned that, and if they do, they answer in riddles, and they're ambiguous. When they want you to know something, they want you to know something, and it's not going to do any
Yeah.
good any other way. However, if you did well in their teaching programs, you were rewarded by getting to ask a question and get an answer, which finally I got my answer to why me, why me, why me, why me, or why any of us in that respect.
Good question. Yeah,
And
why?
they showed first hologram that came up was, I didn't know what to expect. I saw, it was a World War II scene. It was Nazi soldiers, and it was the Axis power Italian soldiers, and my lineage is goes back all the way to Rome, actually. And so I could see a resemblance of myself in one of these soldiers, but I wasn't getting the picture at first. I later asked my father, who said, yeah, he said, during World War II, you did have family who unfortunately had to fight for that side because they were living in that part of the world. Okay, then it went back scene after scene all the way to the Roman period, and then it went all the way back to these ape-like looking things in the savannah,
Wow.
which according to them, they claim that they manipulated these beings to make us what we are today. So they do follow family lines.
Yeah, because there really isn't any connecting link. It just happened like that, I think. Yeah.
Out of the blue for me, no doubt.
Jim, we're sorry to say we're running out of time here, but future shows here on the Cutting Edge will be Dr. Louis Torrey will be here with his 2008 predictions. That's always interesting because
Yes,
he's
every year.
pretty much right on the money. And in late January, author Ed Martin will be here appearing in person, along with his book, The King of Travelers, Jesus Christ, the lost years, or his lost years in India.
India.
You know, the Bible talks about Christ up until when he was about 13 years old, and you don't hear about him again until he was in his 30s.
Right.
What went on there?
Yeah,
Well, that's
going on.
that's
Missing
what his
books of the Bible.
fascinating book is all about. And
Yes.
by the way, I want to show the audience one more time Jim's book. This is a riveting book.
The Keepers.
I read every page of this, and it's just a fascinating book. And believe me, we only scratched the surface here tonight, folks. So if you get this book, you'll learn the rest of the story, like Paul Harvey says.
Yes.
Okay.
Like they say, there's two sides to every pancake. So
Exactly.
get to read the rest of the story there.
Jim, this is just absolutely fascinating. Your life, the things that have gone on, that you've learned. That stuff is priceless. You know?
Yes, it was rather negative at first, but it certainly was worth it to this day.
Yeah. You know, what was I going to say?
We have the UFO magazine.
Yeah,
too.
we have. There's a connection here. This is the UFO magazine.
The recent
here.
issue, yes.
It's the latest issue, and there's a really interesting article in here about. Hey, thanks for tuning in. This has been a great show, and we're out of time, and we've got to go, folks. But remember one thing, you can hear them all on the radio, but here on The Cutting Edge, you actually get to experience them. So long for now. Till next time.